welcome Moonidepa Tarafdar, who is joining us online to talk to us about responsibility in the age of AI and algorithms. And we have set up a camera right here so she can see the room. Yes.
Hello.
I can see a few people that I recognize. I can see Nancy. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
And there are people at the back. I think I recognize them, but if I make a mistake, so I won't say the name. There's somebody who's back. I can only be sure of Elias and Nancy's faces. Other faces seem familiar, but I'm not sure.
Moonidepa Tarafdar is the Charles Dockendorf Endowed Professor of Information Systems of the Eisenberg School of Management, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and she has held prestigious visiting roles and in different institutes in the world, such as at the MIT, the Center of Information Systems. She's a leading researcher in technostress, and she has published extensively in the top IS journals and operation management journals. Her research has secured over $1 million US in grants, and she has very close ties to the industry as well. And she's a scientific advisor to a startup in Dublin that designs programs in well-being oriented use of technology. And in addition to all that, she has served as an editor for the top IS journals. And as of last month, she's the editor-in-chief, the new editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Association of Information Systems. So let us welcome her today.
So, Elias, should I start? I can only hear you. By the way, I don't think I can hear the room, but that is fine.
Did you hear the room clapping? Did you hear
no,
them?
I saw.
So we need to be louder. Did it go through now?
No, it didn't come through, but I think the mic is... No, that's fine. I just wanted to let you know the mic is catching your voice. So if anybody else wants to answer questions, you probably have to go to them. Yes. But that's fine.
So we have 2 microphones, and then we can circulate when people... Okay. So I'll be running that session. And if someone wants to interrupt, we can do that. And also in the end, we'll do, of course, the Q&A.
Okay, so should we start?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Okay. So first of all, it's my great pleasure. Thank you, Elias, for inviting me. I wish I could have been there in person, but this comes so close to the starting of my JIS term that I thought that it would be too rushed for me to go to Portugal at this time. So I requested if I could do it online, and the organizers very kindly agreed to this. So I'm very happy to be here, even though it's virtually, and it's so nice to see faces that we all know. What I'm going to do today is it's not going to be a paper presentation, but I'm going to take a look at our field from the point of view of responsibility. And we talk a lot about responsible research, responsible this, responsible that, particularly now that we have algorithms which kind of do things which we don't always understand and cannot control. And what I say today, or what I'm sharing my thoughts today based on a couple of editorials that will be coming out in JAIS. One is the special issue editorial on digital responsibility, which a few of us are handling. And the second one is going to be my first editorial, which will come out in the November issue. So as I was writing these editorials or preparing or working on these editorials, I thought this would be a nice way to sort of share my thoughts. And Elias also mentioned that it would be great to talk about plans for JIS and things like that. We can talk about it at the end. So what I've planned is about 30 minutes of just sharing my thoughts with everyone and my view of the field as we are going forward. And then we can have a discussion, or I don't want to call it Q&A. It can be a discussion, it can be a Q&A, whatever. Is that okay, Elias?
Yes, that is perfect.
Let's. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
So let me just, okay. So what I've done is I haven't put on share screen because there's something wrong with my PC at home. So it's going to be a big screen like this, but it will not be in presentation mode. So I hope that is all right. It shouldn't be a problem. So what I'm going to touch upon today is is what do we mean by responsibility? So traditional views of responsibility, and then the IT artifacts that we've been used to so far, and their effects, and how that played into how we were responsible about their effects. And then we get into the new types of artifacts that now we are working with, and what happens in those artifacts and how their effects play out differently from the ones that we have worked with, let's say 5 years, till about 5-6 years ago. And then so what happens with this responsibility thing? How does responsibility look like? And then, implications for our scholarship, and particularly what I think JIS is going to, champion. So, if you talk about responsibility, and I went back to the dictionaries, and there are 3 aspects. Every paper that I've read, or every definition that I've seen, if I bring them together, there are 3 aspects to responsibility. One is accountability. If you have the power to control something, you are accountable for it. You are answerable for it. And the accountability will be held in terms of metrics. There will be measurements, either qualitative or quantitative indicators. And there will be something which says if you're not accountable, then there will be consequences. So that's the first aspect of responsibility. The second aspect is, if I'm in a position of influence, if I have a moral or a legal position or an approach or a view, then I'm obliged to do something which goes against that. If I see that something is happening and I'm in a position of influence to correct it, then I do that. So the second aspect is obligation. To defend a position, to use a position, to defend a moral or legal position, and to use a position of influence to do something. And the third aspect of responsibility is what we call as reliability, dependability. I also call it consistency, meaning that I show up regularly, I show up when needed, and I do the things that are required, and it is done in a consistent way, and it is someone can rely on me and depend on me. So accountability, obligation, and reliability are the 3 cornerstones of what we call as responsibility. Right. So now if we look at, I'm just going to walk through some of the IS research, and this is going to be a very broad sweep. It will be a very, very broad sweep. It's not going to be one research stream or the other, right? So the way I look at responsibility, so far what we have done is, let's look at some of the positive effects of technology. And we are not new to them, but it's worth going over. I call them the bright side. And we started with process transformation and efficiency, as a field back in the 60s and 70s. And then we went into innovation. So at the organizational level, so red is organizational, blue is user level, individual level, and the green is the societal level. So I'm talking about 3 kinds of positive effects of technology, or IS as we call it, as our view of technology. So at the organization level, we've seen tremendous process transformation, we've seen efficiency, we've seen innovations, we've seen process reliability, process re-engineering, and there have been positive effects of that. At the user level, we have seen things like user satisfaction, users being able to do their job properly, in a more easy way. We all know the constructs of ease of use, usefulness. We have also seen challenge and achievement kinds of emotions. This is all from the literature. There are references for each of these, but I've taken out the references. Then there is motivation. So we've got all of these user-related effects, motivational effects, achievement effects, satisfaction effects. And again, this is a broad sweep. This I'm talking about the literature in the 90s, 80s, 90s, up until the mid-2000s. And then we also get into the societal effects, particularly after 2000, where we have telehealth, e-governance, where the use of technology in societal processes and government processes, citizen-facing processes, has yielded a lot of efficiencies in the way we interact, pay our taxes, pay our, bills, utility bills, or, interact with the government, even voting. This year there are so many countries which are going into elections, and, I've lived and worked in 3 countries, India, the UK, and the US, and all 3 countries have gone into elections, and I'm eligible to vote for in the UK and the US. And we know that, and in India also, I'm not eligible to vote, but I follow the elections. The use of technology, particularly in India, has been tremendous for the elections. Given that it is almost close to 1.5 billion people, the largest election ever in the world happens every time the Indians go to the polls. Even in the US, we are seeing technology playing a good and a bad role, but the good role is there's efficiencies in the process. And then we will go to the bad role as well. So this is all the bright side of technology that we see. And then we have, of course, the dark side. And the dark side, again, for the user, for the organization, and for the government or the society. So for the organization, we have surveillance, we have monitoring. This is ubiquitous now, even if whether or not somebody uses the data, but pretty much everything we do, if we are doing it through a digital medium, is somewhere recorded. Then there is workflow rigidity, resistance to that. There's technical security breaches. These are all things which make things more difficult. And at the individual level, we have addiction, we have techno-stress. So these are all psychological cognitive effects that users face when they use technology. And this is not an exhaustive list, but this is a good list of what we have seen. Security breaches, users non-compliance is a very big negative effect when IS security becomes very tight. And then, of course, at the societal level, which we are seeing now at mass scale, is misinformation, whether it's political misinformation or social misinformation. And then we have echo chambers. So social media has a lot of, we've seen a lot of dark side effects from the social media as well. So if you look at these two, and then we look at, okay, what is responsibility now? So we pretty much see that there's one side dark, one side bright, and pretty much they can work in isolation, what I call is isolation. And because they work in isolation, on one side you have these effects, on the one side you have the other effects, what we can say is we can operate on the given definition of responsibility. We can say, okay, what does accountability mean? Accountability means how to diminish the dark side, how to enhance the bright side. What does obligation mean? Obligation means, for information systems, we've always seen we want to increase IS adoption because we want to enhance some of the good effects. We want to enhance the benefits from IS. We want to manage IS-related change. Now, whether or not companies can actually do this well, our literature has a lot of, we've developed a lot of knowledge on all of these things because we feel that it is not just about implementing the technology. We also have to see whether it's really beneficial or not, so a lot of, technology implementation, all of this, we have developed a literature. And the position we are coming from there is we have an obligation to do something because we cannot just put the technology in and walk away. So we have streams on efficiencies on the top, we have streams on change management, and of course, reliability and dependability. All of the research that we have on accuracy, usefulness, security, workflow and transactions, process transformation, they are all research streams that speak to reliability and dependability. And so my position here is that with respect to our traditional technologies, we have tried, and to a large extent, I would say, we have been very mindful of doing addressing these three criteria for responsibility. We have developed both dark side, bright side research streams. We have research that tries to enhance the one and diminish the other, or tackle the other. I won't say diminish, but tackle. Then we have a good stream on the user, adoption, change management. We have a very strong stream on accuracy and on the reliability and the efficiency aspect. So, and I'm not saying we are perfect, but we have a handle on some of these things, right? Over the last, I would say, 20, 30 years. Now let's go to what we are seeing today with the technologies that we face. So I'm going to put a picture here. This is a picture that won the first prize, I think, at one of the. It was an art competition in the US, And this is an AI-generated image. And what we see there is, this is from one of the newspapers. I think it's the Wall Street Journal, or I think it's the New York Times, one of those two. And the headline says, an AI-generated picture won an art prize and artists aren't happy. And the one who won, he says, it was a he, and he says, I won and I didn't break any rules. So here we have a situation where we know that we like art, we like music, we like different forms of creations, and that, those make us happy. Those take us to higher levels of whatever it is, right? And so if technology can do that for us, it's a good thing, one would imagine, right? If there's music that's coming out, if there's poetry that's coming out, if there's higher forms of creativity that's coming out from whatever technology we're using, in this case it's AI, it's a good thing. But at the same time, is it such a good thing? Can there be, is it completely dark, or is it completely bright, or is it somewhere gray? And so I call that entangled. In this editorial, we're calling it entangled. And entangled means that it's not easy to say that the effects of some of these technologies is either good or bad. Now, some of the shades of that was present in the earlier technologies, but now it's very stark. So this is one example, and we don't often talk about AI and creativity. We mostly talk about bias and things like that, but I think this is important because all of us have creative streaks inside us because we are authors, and this is something that affects us. If you're reading a novel and we don't know who wrote it, and then that affects our experience, and that's important to us as human beings. Another example is, social media. We see this a lot. On the left side, this is a feed from one of the news channels. On the left side, there was somebody. This event happened when an important political person died in Iran, and they showed this picture, and then somebody tagged it and said, this is not the picture, this is not the plane that crashed, this is something different, but it looks very realistic, it could have been that plane. And on the other hand, we have social media, where social movements are being generated through social media. I think every 2-3 months something or the other happens around the world where young people come together and mobilize against something or for something, and those somethings are usually societal values which have been called into question because of something or the other that happened. And in India something happened 2 months ago, 1 month ago, which led to a big social movement. And this is happening many places around the world. And so when you look at social media, it's very, very hard to say whether it's good or bad. It's really, really hard to say because of these experiences. And so another example of entanglement. So what I say here is, now I go back to the literature. And what have we seen in the last, I would say the last 5 to 6 years, maybe, 5 to 6 years, I would say. So, there's also references for all this, but I've taken them out. So here we do not have a bright and a dark side which can be pulled apart. We have a bright and a dark side which are very, very entangled. And this is some of the research that I have seen. Some of it is my own research, but others, there are many, many articles on all of these topics. So if you look at automation has been around for a long time. It was a cornerstone. It was what first started our field. Automation of payroll and HR processes, right? Now automation has taken on a new sort of color where we are automating based on learning algorithms which go into data and find out patterns and use those patterns to automate future processes. And therefore, on the one hand you have automation, on the other hand you have bias, and we have seen this. This is a big topic of research, and bias is not so big in IS, but it's really big in other areas which kind of overlap with IS. Another one is transparency. We used to think that transparency, even 3 years ago, if you look at the papers, transparency was the holy grail. You make something transparent, users will be happy, end of story. And now we are seeing, in my own research I have seen, and other papers that I have, read, transparency goes hand in hand with a lot of, other effects. So we are seeing an inverted kind of relationship where too much transparency makes you not trust the algorithm. If you know everything about it, you're not going to trust it, and you will have aversion under some circumstances. Other circumstances, if you have too much transparency, you will just lose, you will just, leave your brain outside your head and you will just say, okay, I know everything about it, it's really good, I can trust it blindly. So we have, on the one hand, transparency is important, and on the other hand, we have all of these effects that are entangled with, the kind of transparency that we have. This is something I know a lot about techno. Use stress and distress, they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand because the same artifact characteristics affect both of them. You cannot say this feature causes distress and that feature causes use stress. The same feature causes both. This is another one that, I'm familiar with, engagement and addiction. So at what point, if I am, let's say people might say, let's say I check email a lot, my office email. And somebody looking at me might say, okay, she's addicted to email. But where is this addiction, where is the line between addiction and engagement with my work? Maybe I just want to be engaged with my work. As an editor, you get so many, you get hundreds of emails every day. So you can say, okay, if someone says, I want to I want to address my email or, do my email as and when it comes. I don't want to keep it for, the night or 2 hours in a day or 1 hour in a day. I don't want to do that. It seems like addiction, but it may not be that. So again, very, very, very difficult. Hallucination and inspiration. ChatGPT, we've heard all about it, but it's the same artifact that does it. Social movements and misinformation, the slide we just saw. So all in all, what's happening is that things cannot be separated as they used to before, right? So I'll give you some examples, more examples of entangled. So for example, let's say you have an artifact or an AI, let's say in this case a machine learning algorithm that screens resumes automatically. It's a very, very common scenario, extremely common. And the dark side of that is, the AI resume sorting application it could lead to bias in hiring because they might be looking for certain words and they may be related to demographics and things like that. And then you have, other effects. The bright side is the organization realizes, okay, we have bias. There's a lot of examples where these algorithms have actually brought to light the bias that existed before, but no one thought about it or no one knew about it because it was not brought to light in the same way that data can bring things out to light when you process it like that. Okay. Now, so this bright side can have two effects. If there's no legislation, organizations, if they're not obliged to report such bias, they won't. And I have seen this in working with companies who do this kind of application. They say if our clients don't have an obligation, a legal obligation to report any bias, they will not. That's a dark side. Right side could be they actually take steps to reduce bias, and so on and so forth. So you see these effects are all. It's black and yellow all at the same time. This is one example. This is a very common example. Another example is people, So let's say A's social media describes their holiday. I went to Porto, it was very rainy and all of that, but I had a good time. And then B's envy depending on how authentic B thinks the post is, right? And we all know that social media posts have varying degrees of authenticity because the interpretation and the actual posting are very different. So B's envy depending on how authentic B thinks the post is, and B stays ruined. That's the outcome, right? Again, bright side and dark. A may not even have thought about it. A might have just posted something. It was fun. Unthinking. Okay, and it gets even darker and more stark with A and B are children, and it's not just about holidays. So we all know that, right? So again, entanglement. So another entanglement. This happens in techno stress. You have the distress ones going. So earlier, we used to think that the effects are separate, but now there is research which shows one of my latest papers shows that the distress can affect the good outcomes and the eustress can affect the bad outcomes. And that's an interesting finding because earlier we thought that it was all, separate. They go separate. They have separate parts. So another example of entanglement. So when I look at our research that's coming out, I see more and more examples like this. And in my own work also, I see more and more examples of this. And so, where is responsibility here? How can we still apply the old principles? Or how can we apply the old principles? So, I have 3 problems here with the old definition. The first problem is, if I'm not able to control anything, then how can I be accountable? So when I say control, if you look at systems development was always difficult to control. There were always unknown effects. That is taken from, we are not saying that earlier systems were easier to control, but now what we have is the entangled effects make for a lot of emergence, and therefore you cannot really predict what the use of the artifact is going to lead to. It's become difficult to predict. It's difficult to control. Think of all the technology companies, and they started out as technology companies, whether it's Uber or Airbnb or Meta or any of these other organizations, which started as tech companies because tech companies have less regulation, at least in the US, because of the innovation imperative. And if you're a tech company, you are not called to question on many things. And then, if your artifact leads to effects, then the guardrails are not there, right? And so, if the guardrails are not there, the effects cannot be predicted. So, right now in the US, one of the biggest things is misinformation for the elections. One of the biggest discussions. And some of these tech companies, for example, there was an article in one of the papers where Mark Zuckerberg said, "I'm fed up of being, always, Facebook getting Meta getting pulled into all this, bias and all this misinformation conversation. I don't want to be part of this. We are neutral." This is what he said. But of course, it's not neutral. But at the same time, it's hard to control. So control is difficult. Obligation, moral and legal lines are becoming very hard to define as far as technology is concerned. I'll give you an example. Just hiring, right? This is from my own research. In hiring, what we say is we don't want to hire based on the person's color of skin, ethnicity, race, their sex, whatever. We want to be neutral, right? How do you know that? So so a lot of these resume screening, application tracking systems, what they do is they will not let the hiring committee know about the personal characteristics of the candidate. Aside from the name, they are not going to let you know, the age, the gender, whatever. Because they want to protect, particularly in many countries in Europe, people have a right to protect, there's rights for protecting personal information. Okay, if you don't know that, how do you make sure that you are hiring effectively? It's very hard. There are many other situations where it's hard to take a stance, because taking the stance, makes you not take a different stance, and then the effect of both of them sort of cancel out. So moral and legal positions are hard to define. Reliability and dependability, dependability and reliability are very difficult because outputs are probabilistic. All machine learning outputs are probabilistic, and it will not be repeated. Go to any Gen AI session today, tomorrow, day after, you will get different answers. And so the reliability and dependability are also being called into question. I mean, think about the ERP kind of systems where you're generating invoices. They used to make mistakes, but those mistakes were consistent. You could predict them. And then if you could correct them, you could. Sometimes you couldn't correct them and you still had the mistakes. But there was not this element of probability in those. There is not that element of probability in those applications. So the position here that I'm taking, and that we are going to talk about in the editorials, is that these conditions of responsibility are hard to fulfill, right? And therefore, what does it look like? What does responsibility look like for us going forward, as researchers, as teachers? I lay out 6 principles or 6 approaches, and the first is process studies. If we cannot predict the phenomenon, if we don't have control over it, then it is an ongoing revealing, right? And the ongoing revealing of the phenomenon will depend on what we are studying, where we are studying it. It's heavily contextualized. So follow the phenomenon is something that we as scholars can do by saying, okay, I cannot predict what the effect of this kind of, let's say, use of Facebook for, election campaigning. I cannot predict what the effects are going to be, so I do process studies. The second is future-focused studies. Now we are increasingly seeing a stream of future-focused studies in IS across the journals, across all our top journals. And I think this is a big area of where we can develop scholarship and look at how we can, if we don't know the future, do we have ways to predict alternate futures, or at least imagine alternate futures, and then we can work on them. They may not be the right futures, they may not be the futures that will actually happen, but at least can we visualize them? Is there scholarship for that? The third, I think, is very important. As we all know, a lot of our students, sometimes even we have discussions as colleagues, why do we need theory? And why do we need to understand how and why when we can predict with so much of data? And this is a conversation that I think is never ending, but the position of, I think, what we are going to take is, theory makes us human, because only being human can we understand why and how. And we know that the systems we are now using do not understand the how and why. So theoretical contributions and precision of concepts. Many of our constructs now are being very loosely defined. So get back to defining what you're saying and try to understand. So theoretical clarity, precision, contributions is something I think we should make it stronger, right? And then I think we have to embrace messiness in our epistemic approaches because we have many of the questions that we're trying to tackle are, interdisciplinary. They focus on big questions, and therefore IS-focused interdisciplinary research questions. IS-focused, no, it's not just interdisciplinary, but IS-focused. And inclusive with regard to methods and philosophical approaches. Multiplicity is important. When I was a doctoral student, this was in the early 2000s, we used to read a lot of papers in MIS quarterly about qualitative versus quantitative and this and that. And a lot of our senior colleagues have written lots of papers on this. And I think that now we have come to a point where we say, if you don't respect the multiplicity of scholarly views, we are not going to be able to address many of the research questions. Then there is stakeholder diversity, points of view. So, right, we need to look at, we've always looked at designers, application developers, IT units, we've looked at organizational functions. I think now we need to look at users in terms of families, in terms of neurodiverse users, gender diverse users. We also want to take into account the points of view of regulators and lawmakers, because the stakeholder base of technology, or IS as we define it, has increased dramatically. So we have to have acknowledge the diversity of that in our research. And I think the last one, as not the least, is care. How do we make an impact? And can we go after the big questions? Even if we don't solve the whole question, can we even raise awareness about them and look at it, even if we do slices of it, can we still do that? So these are my 6 approaches, and I don't have more to say, but I think this is where I'll stop. And we can have a conversation, because I'd like to know what everyone thinks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.